The massive starship Crimson Talon floated silently above Earth like a giant metal predator watching its next meal. Inside the ship's command center, Commander Kiraval stood with her arms crossed, staring at the small blue planet through the viewing screen. Her red armor gleamed under the bright lights, and her tall, muscular frame made her look like a warrior goddess from ancient legends. "Look at this pathetic little world," she said to her lieutenant Nixara, who was busy listening to radio signals coming from Earth's surface. "They actually think they can defend themselves against us." Nixara pulled off her headphones and started laughing. "Commander, you need to hear this. I've been listening to their military communications all morning, and it's hilarious." She pressed a button, and suddenly the command center filled with voices speaking in different languages. Korean voices came through clearly from Seoul Military Command, where Captain Lee Hyun-woo was giving orders to his troops. "All units, please maintain your defensive positions around the city. Make sure the civilian evacuation routes stay clear. Protect the women and children first," his calm voice said through the speakers. Kiraval's eyes widened in disbelief. Then she burst out laughing so hard that tears formed in her eyes. "Did you hear that? He's worried about protecting people instead of fighting. What kind of warrior talks like that?" "That's not even the funniest part," Nixara said, switching to another channel. "Listen to this one from their American forces." Another male voice came through, speaking in English. "Team Alpha, remember our primary mission is humanitarian aid. We're here to help people, not to start fights. Keep your weapons down unless absolutely necessary." The entire bridge crew of Xerian warriors started laughing and pointing at the speakers. These were supposed to be Earth's defenders. They sounded more like babysitters than soldiers. "In our empire, males can barely lift a sword, let alone command armies," said Captain Zixia, joining the conversation. "But at least our males know their place. These Earth males actually think they're warriors." Kiraval walked closer to the viewing screen and pointed at Earth. "Look at their cities, so small, so fragile. We could destroy them with one attack squadron. And their mighty male warriors would probably surrender immediately to protect their precious civilians. For 300 years, the Xerian Empire had conquered world after world using the incredible fighting skills of their warrior women. In their society, females were born to fight, while males stayed home to cook, clean, and take care of children. It was the natural order of things. Strong conquered weak, and females were always stronger than males. "Commander," said Nixara, "I intercepted another transmission, this time from their European forces. The commanding officer is actually crying while talking to his wife before battle." They played the recording, and sure enough, a man's voice could be heard saying goodbye to his family with tears in his voice. "I love you and the kids so much. If something happens to me, just remember that everything I do is for you." "Crying before battle," Kiraval shouted. "These aren't warriors. They're emotional children. How did such a weak species even survive long enough to build spaceships?" The Xerian warriors had seen this pattern on every world they conquered. Males were naturally weaker, more emotional, and less capable of real violence. It was basic biology. Females had the killer instinct, the physical strength, and the mental toughness needed for war. Males were good for making babies and doing simple work, but fighting? Impossible. "Commander, what are your orders?" asked Nixara. "Should we begin the invasion immediately?" Kiraval smiled wickedly and walked to her command chair. "Not yet. First, I want to have some fun with these humans. Open a communication channel to all their major cities." Within minutes, every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth was hijacked by the Xerian signal. Kiraval's face appeared on screens around the world, her red armor gleaming and her voice full of contempt. "Greetings, people of Earth. I am Commander Kiraval of the Xerian Empire. We have been watching your pathetic little world, and we've decided to make you an offer." She paused dramatically, enjoying the moment. "Surrender now, and we might let some of you live as slaves. Your females might be useful for basic labor, though they're obviously much weaker than true Xerian women. As for your males," she started, laughing again, "well, they can continue doing whatever it is they do now. Crying, cooking, and hiding behind their women." The transmission switched to show recordings of Earth's military communications, with Xerian voices mocking every word. The human soldiers had spoken. "Listen to them," Kiraval continued. Your so-called warriors care more about protecting people than winning battles. They cry before fighting. They put civilian safety above military victory. These are not the qualities of real soldiers. She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes glowing with confidence. You have 24 Earth hours to surrender completely. If you refuse, we'll show you what real warriors can do. But don't worry, we promise to make it quick. After all, it wouldn't be fair to drag this out against such inferior opponents. The transmission ended, leaving Earth in stunned silence while the Xerian fleet prepared for what they assumed would be the easiest conquest in their empire's history. 3 days after the Xerian ultimatum, a small shuttlecraft left Earth's atmosphere carrying humanity's last hope for peace. The neutral space station Harmony floated between Earth and the Xerian fleet like a tiny island in the vast ocean of space. It was humanity's idea to meet there, away from both worlds, to try one last time to avoid a war. Major Park Ji-ho sat quietly in the shuttle, checking his equipment one final time. At 35 years old, he had served in Korea's special forces for over a decade, but he'd never imagined he'd be representing all of humanity in talks with alien warriors. His calm brown eyes showed no fear, even though everyone knew this might be a suicide mission. Sitting across from him was Dr. Kim So-young, Earth's best expert on alien cultures. She had spent the last few days studying every piece of information they had about Xerian society, trying to understand how these warrior women thought, and what might convince them to leave Earth alone. Remember, she said softly as their shuttle docked with the space station, their entire culture is built around physical strength and combat prowess. They literally cannot understand why we would put civilian safety above military glory. Ji-ho nodded. I've read your reports. In their society, males are considered weak and only good for basic labor. They probably see me as the worst possible choice for a negotiator. That's exactly why you're perfect for this job, So-young replied with a small smile. If we can change their minds about one human male, maybe we can change their minds about all of us. The meeting room on Harmony Station felt tiny when Commander Kiraval entered with her entourage. She had to duck slightly to fit through the doorway, and her massive red armor made her look like a walking tank. Behind her came Lieutenant Nixara and 2 other Xerian warriors, all of them towering over the human delegates. So, Kiraval said, her voice dripping with amusement, Earth sends a male to negotiate for their survival. This is even more pathetic than I expected. She looked Ji-ho up and down like she was examining a piece of broken furniture. Are you sure you're in the right place, little man? Shouldn't you be at home taking care of children while the real adults handle important matters? Dr. So-young started to speak, but Ji-ho gently raised his hand to stop her. Commander Kiraval, I'm Major Park Ji-ho, representing Earth's Unified Military Command. We're here because we believe this conflict can be resolved without bloodshed. The Xerian warriors burst out laughing. Nixara actually had to wipe tears from her eyes. Did you hear that? He thinks he can solve problems with words instead of weapons. How adorable. Let me guess, Kiraval said, sitting down in a chair that groaned under the weight of her armor. You want to talk about peace and cooperation and all those other weak concepts that males always babble about? Ji-ho remained perfectly calm. I want to talk about survival. Yours and ours. This caught Kiraval's attention. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Survival? Are you threatening us, little human? I'm stating facts, Ji-ho replied. You've conquered 12 worlds using the same strategy every time. Overwhelming force against opponents who fight the way you expect them to fight. But Earth is different. Dr. So-young pulled out a tablet and began showing holographic displays of Earth's military history. Commander, we've studied your previous conquests. Every species you defeated used traditional warrior culture combat methods, single combat, honor duels, direct confrontation. Because that's how real warriors fight, Nixara interrupted. Face to face, strength against strength. But humans don't fight that way, Ji-ho said quietly. We fight to win, not for glory. We use deception, teamwork, and strategy. We protect our civilians because they're our strength, not our weakness. Kiraval stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Enough of this nonsense. You talk about strategy and teamwork because you're too weak for real combat. Prove me wrong. The room fell silent. Dr. So Young's eyes went wide with concern. What are you suggesting? Ji-ho asked. Single combat, Kiraval announced with a wicked grin. You against me, right here, right now. If you somehow manage to defeat me, we'll consider leaving your pathetic world alone. When I crush you like the insect you are, your planet surrenders. Immediately. Commander, Dr. So Young protested. That's hardly a fair contest. You're enhanced, armored, and trained from birth for combat. Life isn't fair, Kiraval laughed. The strong survive, the weak serve. That's the law of the universe. Ji-ho looked at his colleague, then back at the towering alien warrior. Everyone in the room knew this was suicide. Kiraval was 7 feet tall, incredibly strong, and covered in advanced battle armor. Ji-ho was a normal human with standard military gear, but he also knew that billions of people on Earth were counting on this moment. Children were hiding in shelters, families were saying goodbye to each other, and entire cities were preparing for invasion. If there was even a small chance that this fight could save them, he had to take it. I accept, he said simply. The Xerians cheered and started making preparations immediately, calling for the combat to be broadcast to both fleets. Dr. So Young grabbed Ji-ho's arm. This is insane, she whispered. She'll kill you in seconds. Ji-ho looked at her with those same calm brown eyes. Maybe, but I've been studying her while she's been underestimating me. Sometimes that's all the advantage you need. As they prepared for combat, neither side realized that this single fight would change everything. Both species thought they knew about strength, courage, and what it truly meant to be a warrior. The combat arena aboard the Xerian flagship, Crimson. Talon buzzed with excitement as hundreds of alien warriors gathered to watch what they expected to be the shortest fight in their empire's history. The circular fighting platform was about 30 feet wide, surrounded by energy barriers that would keep the combat contained. Bright lights illuminated every corner, and cameras were broadcasting the event live to both the Xerian fleet and Earth's. Military Command. Commander Kiraval stepped into the arena like a gladiator entering the Colosseum. Her crimson armor gleamed under the lights, and her plasma sword hummed with deadly energy. The weapon could cut through steel like butter, and had ended the lives of countless enemies across 12 conquered worlds. She raised the sword above her head, and the Xerian crowd roared with approval. Look at her, Lieutenant Nixara said from the viewing platform. 7 feet tall, enhanced strength, battle armor that can stop artillery shells, and a weapon that's never failed her. This isn't going to be a fight. It's going to be an execution. On the other side of the arena, Major Park Ji-ho looked almost comically small in comparison. He wore standard Earth military fatigues and carried basic combat gear. A tactical knife, some flash grenades, and a simple Kevlar vest that would be useless against a plasma sword. No enhancement, no powered armor, no energy weapons. Just a regular human being who looked like he was about to face a dragon with a toothpick. Dr. Kim So-young watched from the human observation area, her hands clenched into fists. This is suicide, she whispered to herself. What was he thinking? The fight began exactly as everyone expected. Kiraval charged forward with incredible speed, her plasma sword leaving a trail of energy in the air. Ji-ho barely managed to roll aside as the weapon sliced through the spot where he'd been standing just a moment before. The plasma beam left a glowing scar in the arena floor. Too slow, little human, Kiraval taunted, spinning around for another attack. Her second strike caught Ji-ho in the shoulder, sending him flying across the arena. He crashed into the energy barrier and slumped to the ground, groaning in pain. The Xerian crowd cheered wildly, already celebrating their commander's inevitable victory. Kiraval walked slowly toward her fallen opponent, savoring the moment. This is what happens when weakness meets strength, she announced for the cameras. Your pathetic species should have surrendered when they had the chance. She raised her plasma sword for the killing blow, but something unexpected happened. Instead of begging for mercy or trying to crawl away, Ji-ho was watching her. His dark eyes were studying every movement she made, analyzing her fighting style with the calm focus of a chess master planning his next move. You telegraph your attacks, he said quietly, rolling aside just as her sword came down. What? Kiraval snarled, confused by his calm tone. Your footwork, Jiho continued, getting back to his feet despite his injured shoulder. You step with your left foot before every power strike, and you hold your sword too high when you're confident, leaving your lower torso exposed. The Zirian commander's eyes narrowed. Clever words won't save you from... She charged again, but this time Jiho was ready. He'd been counting the seconds between her attacks, timing her breathing patterns, memorizing the rhythm of her movements. When she stepped forward with her left foot, he knew exactly where her sword would go. Instead of dodging backward like before, he moved forward and to the side inside her guard where the long plasma sword couldn't reach him effectively. His tactical knife found the gap between her armor plates at the knee joint, not deep enough to cause serious injury, but enough to disrupt her balance. Kiraval stumbled, more surprised than hurt. Impossible. You're just a weak male. I'm a human, Jiho replied, pulling a flash grenade from his belt. We don't fight fair, we fight smart. The grenade exploded in a burst of blinding light. The Zirians had enhanced vision, which meant the flash affected them much more severely than it would affect a human. Kiraval roared in rage and pain, swinging her sword wildly in all directions. But Jiho wasn't there anymore. While she was blinded and disoriented, he had circled around behind her, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone trained in special operations warfare. The Zirian crowd fell silent, unable to believe what they were seeing. Your armor has a power coupling on the back, Jiho said calmly. I noticed it when you turned to show off for your audience earlier. Kiraval spun around, her vision clearing just in time to see Jiho's knife slice through the energy conduit that powered her plasma sword. The weapon flickered and died with a disappointed whine. No! She screamed, pressing the activation button, desperately. Nothing happened. For the first time in the fight, they were on equal footing. Well, almost equal. She was still 7 feet tall and incredibly strong, but now they both had just metal blades. This isn't over, Kiraval growled, drawing a backup combat knife from her armor. No, Jiho agreed, but now it's actually a fight. What happened next shocked every Zirian watching. Instead of trying to overpower her, Jiho used techniques that no Zirian warrior had ever encountered. He used her own momentum against her, redirected her attacks instead of blocking them directly, and targeted pressure points that her culture's combat training had never taught her to protect. When Kiraval lunged forward with all her strength, Jiho sidestepped and used a judo throw to send her crashing to the ground, her own power working against her. When she tried to grab him with her enhanced strength, he slipped out of her grip and struck nerve clusters that temporarily numbed her arms. You fight like a coward, she gasped, struggling to get back up. I fight like someone who wants to go home to his family, Jiho replied, helping her to her feet, a gesture of respect that confused her completely. The arena was dead silent. An inferior human male had just defeated the champion of the Zirian Empire, not through superior strength or better weapons, but through intelligence, adaptability, and tactics that their warrior culture had never imagined. Lieutenant Nixera stared in disbelief from the viewing platform. How is this possible? Dr. So Young smiled for the first time since the fight began. Because he's human, she said softly, and humans never fight the way their enemies expect them to. Commander Kiraval stared at the fallen plasma sword for a long moment, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. In 300 years of Zirian conquest, no male from any species had ever defeated one of their warriors in single combat. The silence in the arena was deafening. This changes nothing, she finally declared, though her voice lacked its earlier confidence. One lucky victory doesn't prove your species is worthy of survival. The invasion proceeds as planned, but something had shifted in the room. The Zirian warriors weren't cheering anymore. They were whispering among themselves, casting uncertain glances at Major Park Jiho, who stood calmly in the center of the arena despite his injuries. Dr. Kim So Young rushed to Jiho's side as medical teams arrived. That was incredible, but you know this means they'll attack with everything they have now. Jiho nodded grimly. I was hoping to avoid the war entirely, but at least now they know we're not helpless. That might make them more cautious. He was wrong about that part. If anything, Kiraval was now furious and determined to prove that her defeat was just a fluke. Within hours of returning to her flagship, she gave the order that would change everything. Begin the invasion immediately, she commanded her fleet. I want every major city on Earth under our control within 48 hours. Show these humans what real warfare looks like. The Xerian fleet descended on Earth like a swarm of metal locusts. Their ships were massive, armed with weapons that could level city blocks and filled with warriors who had never known defeat. They expected the same pattern they'd seen on 12 other worlds. Quick destruction of military targets, followed by the surrender of a broken population. Instead, they found something completely different. Colonel Choi Min-ho sat in Seoul's underground command center, watching the alien ships approach on dozens of screens. Around him, officers from every nation on Earth worked together in a way that would have been impossible just weeks earlier. The alien threat had united humanity like nothing else in their history. All units, remember your training, Min-ho spoke into his headset. They expect us to meet them head-on like traditional warriors. Instead, we disappear the moment they land. The first wave of Xerian dropships touched down in major cities across the globe. The warriors inside expected to find human armies waiting to fight them in glorious battle. Instead, they found empty streets and abandoned buildings. Where is everyone? Lieutenant Nixara asked as her squad moved through downtown Seoul. The city looked like a ghost town, with papers blowing in the wind and cars sitting empty in the middle of roads. That's when the real war began. Captain Yoon Tae-min watched the Xerian patrol through his scope from a building 3 blocks away. His sniper team had been in position for 6 hours waiting for the perfect moment. The aliens were walking in formation, confident and exposed, following their warrior code that said real fighters face their enemies directly. Target the one. In front, Taemin whispered to his spotter. Then we moved to position 2. The shot echoed through the empty streets. The lead Xerian warrior dropped, and her squad immediately began looking for the source of the attack. But Taemin and his team were already gone, moving through the subway tunnels to their next position. Cowards! Nixara screamed at the empty buildings. Show yourselves and fight with honor. But honor wasn't the point anymore. Survival was. Lieutenant Seo Haiwan's engineering team had spent weeks preparing Seoul's infrastructure for this moment. As the Xerian warriors spread out to search for their attackers, she activated the traps her people had carefully placed throughout the city. Streetlights exploded in showers of sparks, temporarily blinding the aliens' enhanced vision. Manholes, covers became pressure-sensitive bombs. Traffic signals released clouds of tear gas that didn't affect humans wearing protective masks, but sent the Xerians into coughing fits. Their armor protects them from direct attacks, Haiwan reported to command. But it doesn't help with environmental hazards or electronic warfare. The pattern repeated in cities around the world. Xerian warriors would land expecting glorious combat, and instead find themselves fighting ghosts. Human forces would strike from hiding, cause casualties, and vanish before the aliens could respond. When the Xerians pursued, they found only traps and ambushes. In New York, human forces used the subway system to move unseen beneath the city. In London, they turned the old underground tunnels into a maze that confused and trapped Xerian patrols. In Tokyo, they used the dense urban environment to their advantage, attacking from rooftops and disappearing into crowds of civilians who all looked the same to alien eyes. But it was the psychological warfare that really unsettled the Xerian forces. Sergeant Kim Ji-woo led a rescue operation that saved 3 wounded Xerian warriors from a building fire that had started during the fighting. Instead of killing their enemies or taking prisoners, the humans provided medical aid and released them with a simple message. We don't want to kill you. We just want you to leave our world alone. This kind of behavior was completely alien to the Xerian mindset. In their culture, enemies were either conquered or destroyed. The idea that someone would save their lives and then let them go made no sense at all. Why would they help us? One of the rescued warriors asked Lieutenant Nixara after being returned to her unit. Nixara had no answer. In 3 centuries of conquest, they had never encountered an enemy who showed mercy to defeated foes. The war that the Xerians expected to last hours was stretching into days, then weeks. Their casualty reports showed something impossible. They were losing warriors to an enemy they could barely find, let alone defeat. Commander Kira Val stood in her command center, staring at maps of Earth that showed the locations of her forces. Red dots marked Xerian positions, but they were scattered and isolated. Blue areas showed human-controlled territory, which seemed to be everywhere at once. "How are they doing this?" she demanded of her staff. "We have superior weapons, superior armor, superior physical abilities. Why aren't we winning?" Captain Zixia, one of her senior officers, looked uncomfortable. "Commander, they're not fighting like warriors. They're fighting like hunters. Patient, clever, always thinking 3 moves ahead. And they're males," Nixara added reluctantly. "They're not weak like we thought. They coordinate perfectly with their females, and they're willing to sacrifice themselves to protect others. Yesterday I watched a human male throw himself in front of a plasma blast to save 2 civilians he didn't even know." Kiraval felt something she had never experienced before in combat. Doubt. These humans weren't behaving like any conquered species she had ever encountered. They weren't just fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for something deeper, something that made them far more dangerous than any warrior culture she had ever faced. They were fighting for home. The war had been raging for 3 weeks when the universe decided to throw both sides a curveball that nobody saw coming. Commander Kiraval was studying casualty reports in her flagship when every alarm on the ship started screaming at once. "Commander," her communications officer shouted over the noise, "we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the solar system. Something big is coming through hyperspace." Kiraval's blood ran cold as she saw the sensor readings. Those energy patterns were burned into every Xerian's memory from childhood horror stories. "No," she whispered. "It can't be them." But it was. The Void Seekers had found them. 12 massive black ships emerged from the darkness of space, each one the size of a small moon. They looked like giant mechanical spiders made of twisted metal and pulsing organic matter. These weren't just machines. They were living nightmares that consumed entire civilizations and turned them into more of themselves. "All units. Emergency. Retreat to defensive positions," Kiraval ordered. But she knew it was hopeless. The Void Seekers had destroyed the Xerian homeworld 50 years ago. Only the fleet had escaped, and they'd been running ever since. On Earth, Colonel Choi Minho watched the alien ships appear on his screens with growing dread. "What the hell are those things?" Dr. Kim So-young was frantically analyzing the sensor. "Data. They're not Xerian ships. The energy readings are completely different, and they're heading straight for Earth." That's when something unprecedented happened. Commander Kiraval's face appeared on every human communication channel across the planet. "People of Earth," she said, and for the first time her voice carried no mockery or contempt. "I am Commander Kiraval of the Xerian Empire. Our war is over. Something far worse has arrived." She paused, looking directly into the camera with eyes that showed genuine fear. "Those ships belong to the Void Seekers, the species that destroyed our homeworld. They consume everything: organic matter, metal, energy, even the atoms themselves. If we don't work together right now, both our species will be extinct by tomorrow." The transmission cut to images of what the Void Seekers had done to other worlds. Planets stripped down to their cores, entire solar systems left as empty space. It was like watching the universe itself being eaten alive. Major Park Ji-ho, still recovering from his injuries, was brought to Seoul Command to help coordinate the response. "Can we trust them?" Colonel Minho asked. Ji-ho looked at the tactical displays showing both human and Xerian forces scattered across the globe. "We don't have a choice. And honestly, after fighting alongside humans for 3 weeks, I think some of their warriors might be starting to understand us better." He was right about that. Lieutenant Nixara had spent the last few days thinking about everything she'd witnessed during the invasion. The human soldiers who risked their lives to save civilians. The way they worked together instead of seeking individual glory. The mercy they showed to wounded enemies. When the first Voidseeker landing craft began descending toward Earth, she made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. Human forces in Sector 7, she broadcast on an open channel. This is Xerian Lieutenant Nixara. I have 40 warriors under my command. We request permission to fight alongside you. There was silence on the channel for a moment. Then Captain Yoon Taemin's voice crackled through the speakers. Permission granted, Lieutenant. We could use the help. The first joint battle took place in the ruins of downtown Seoul. The Void. Seekers sent wave after wave of biomechanical horrors that looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh. They moved fast, hit hard, and seemed to feel no pain. But they had never faced the combination of human tactics and Xerian strength working together. Private Lee Dong-wook spotted a group of the creatures flanking Nixara's position. Without hesitation, he grabbed a plasma grenade and ran directly toward them, shouting, "For Earth and Xeria!" before detonating the weapon at point-blank range. Nixara watched in stunned silence as the young human soldier sacrificed his life to save her warriors. She had never seen anything like it. In Xerian culture, you fought for personal glory and conquest. But this human had died for people he'd been trying to kill just hours earlier. "Why?" she whispered, kneeling beside his body. "Why would he do that?" Sergeant Kim Ji-woo, who had been fighting beside them, overheard her question. "Because that's what humans do," he said simply. "We protect each other, even when it's hard." The battle raged for 18 hours straight. Human intelligence and adaptability combined with Xerian strength and advanced weapons created a fighting force unlike anything either species had ever imagined. When human soldiers coordinated complex tactical maneuvers, Xerian warriors provided the firepower to make them devastating. When Xerian forces charged into direct combat, human support teams covered their flanks and treated their wounds. Commander Kiraval found herself fighting side by side with Major Jiho during the final assault on the main Voidseeker landing site. She watched him coordinate a rescue operation that saved 12 wounded Xerian warriors, organizing human medics to treat injuries from weapons they'd never seen before. "You're males," she said during a brief pause in the fighting. "They're not weak at all, are they?" Jiho was helping a wounded Xerian warrior to her feet. "We never were. You were just looking at the wrong kind of strength." "What do you mean?" "Physical? Power is just one type of strength," he explained, handing the warrior over to a human medic. "There's also the strength to protect others, the strength to forgive enemies, the strength to keep fighting even when you're scared." Kiraval thought about Private Lee Dong-wook, throwing himself on a grenade to save her soldiers. About Sergeant Kim Ji-woo organizing medical aid for wounded enemies. About the way human forces had worked together during the invasion, each person playing their part in a plan bigger than any individual. "Your species fights as one," she realized. "Not for individual glory, but for each other." "That's what makes us strong," Jiho agreed. "Not our bodies or our weapons, but our connections to each other." The final Voidseeker ship fell just as the sun was rising over the battlefield. Human and Xerian forces stood together among the wreckage, exhausted but victorious. They had saved both their worlds through cooperation instead of conquest. 3 days later, Empress Valkyra herself arrived at Earth to negotiate the peace treaty. She was an imposing figure, even more massive than Commander Kiraval, but her first words surprised everyone. "Commander Kiraval has told me about your warriors," she said to the assembled human delegates. "About their courage, their tactical brilliance, and their willingness to die for strangers. I came here expecting to accept the surrender of a conquered world. Instead, I find myself requesting an alliance with equals." The treaty was signed aboard the space station Harmony, the same place where the war had nearly begun. Commander Kiraval was appointed as the first Xerian ambassador to Earth, having learned that true strength wasn't about dominating others, but about lifting them up. As she watched human and Xerian children playing together in the station's observation deck, she finally understood what Major Jiho had tried to tell her from the beginning. The greatest warriors weren't those who conquered their enemies, but those who turned enemies into friends. And perhaps most importantly, she had learned that the universe was vast and dangerous enough that no species could survive alone. But, together, working as allies instead of conquerors, They might just have a chance at building something better than either could achieve on their own. The age of Xerian conquest was over. The age of cooperation had begun.